Welcome back and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. So, how is your messaging to your customers? Is it simple and aligned across all of your channels and influencers? Or is it like a lot of brands, simply a lot of mixed messaging with various offers? Are you using everything to point to a common goal and with content that helps people understand and solve their problems? And what are the resources that you use in order to continue to learn to become a better business leader in order to solve these questions? Matt Vinson is the Director of Digital Marketing at Daytona International Speedway, and he's a subject matter expert at sports and digital marketing. And on this episode, we'll discuss aligning your marketing messages, your goals, strategy, content, trading paint, changing tires in 12 seconds, and driving at 200 miles per hour. So let's tune in to the fastest digital marketing director in Daytona with the fastest shark in the ocean on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Matt, thank you so much for joining me today on A Shark's Perspective. So tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get to Daytona International Speedway? Was it an interest in sports and racing or an interest in marketing? How'd you get there?
Yeah, so my background is a little bit different in the fact that I actually majored in engineering technology
Nice.
at UCF.
Perfect. Yeah.
So I grew up in a military household. My dad was in the Air Force. I thought I wanted to work on designing airplanes or theme park rides or doing something engineering. And I actually worked at Lockheed Martin while I was at UCF working on their Apache Arrowhead program.
Wow.
But after about a year and a half there, I kind of figured it really wasn't for me. I wasn't really enjoying myself. Didn't even know you could study sports or how to work in sports, but I love sports. I grew up playing sports and was just trying to figure out, okay, how do I take something that's a passion of mine and turn that into a career? So I started looking up graduate programs and found out that UCF, which I was already at, had one of the top 5 graduate programs. Applied, and I actually did not get in the first time. I didn't have a lot of background in sports, so I took a year off from engineering and really focused on, okay, what do I need to do to get into this program? And I worked at UCF Athletics. I worked for the Orlando Magic. I worked for WrestleMania. When WrestleMania was in town, I volunteered my time out there, really just trying to build my portfolio in sports so that when I applied for the next year, I had a stronger grasp of what exactly I wanted to do.
Now, did you keep going?
Yes, go ahead. I eventually got into that program. Was there for 2 years. I worked on the website for the research for the racial and ethics report card that Dr. Lapchick puts out every year. Worked very closely with Dr. Sutton, who has since gone and started his own program at USF. But from there, one of his old graduate assistants way back in the day had started her own marketing agency out in San Francisco. I went out there. I met with Allison McCauley, who was the founder of High Five Marketing out there. Hit it off right off the bat and kind of worked there for 2 years, really building my foundation of email marketing, social media marketing, website marketing. And then after 2 years, I wanted to come back closer to my family in Florida. Found this opportunity, interviewed with Julie Geezy, who's now the president over at ISM Raceway, and was brought over here back to Daytona.
Did you also surf?
Did not surf. No, I got scuba certified, and I've been scuba certified one time down in Key West. We went down to the Vandenberg wreck, which is about 100 feet deep, which is probably way too deep for my first time.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed myself. Didn't grow up a surfer. I was more of a boogie boarder.
Yeah. Well, so we're going to talk about marketing and digital marketing today, but I got to ask some of the most important questions. Have you ever driven on the track?
I have not driven on the track, but I have been driven on the track. I've done some hot laps every once in a while. There's a long list of employees that have been here a lot longer than me that are next on the certification list to drive.
Yeah.
But as soon as I got here, I put my name on that list because it's something I need to cross off that list.
So nobody else is listening. It's just us girls here. Have you ever snuck onto the track and driven around as fast as possible? So
only when leaving the track.
Exactly.
Not,
So I feel like if it were me and I worked at Daytona International Speedway, I would leave the offices every day and feel compelled on my drive home to completely gun it, trade a little paint on the freeway and just hit it at 200 miles per hour, at least as fast as my old vehicle would go. So tell us the truth. If you were out on the freeway and you had the exact same vehicle, like a two Honda Accords or two Ford Focuses, do you think you could take Denny Hamlin in a race?
No, there's no way. I wish I could, but that guy's got years of
No
experience on
kidding.
me.
Well, when you need new tires, do you go to your local Firestone or somewhere and then just get totally frustrated that it takes them more than 12 seconds to change your tires?
100%. Like when I'm covering social media for one of our races, a lot of the times we go and we'll cover a pit stop. We'll do one in regular time and one in slow motion. It doesn't matter how many times you watch a live NASCAR pit stop. It is the
The
most
most,
amazing
yes,
experience. It's incredible how they changed four tires, put fuel in the car, 12 seconds.
exactly.
When I'm sitting in Firestone, I'm like, let's go. I got things to do today.
Exactly. Yeah. So, well, then let's get down to some somewhat serious business. Daytona International Speedway is the home to not just the Daytona 500, but what other types of events do you house year round?
Yeah, so we have probably 7 major event weekends, starting with the Roar before the Rolex 24 in early January, which is a practice session for our sports car event, the Rolex 24, which is in late January. That event is, unique in that drivers and teams are racing for 24 hours straight.
Right.
A lot of people really understand that, but they literally start at 2:30 on Saturday and the race ends at 2:30 on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible, and those are machines that are prototypes, all the way from Lamborghinis to Corvettes to Porsches to BMWs, all on the track. There's 60 plus cars, 4 different classes, all on the track at the same time. It's really an incredible event. From there, we literally have 2 weeks off, and then we go right into NASCAR Speed Weeks.
Mm-hmm.
During Speed Weeks, we've got anywhere from 10 different events on track, off track, like a beer festival, to a hauler parade, and all kinds of different activities going on. And that all culminates with the Daytona 500, which most people are probably familiar with. From there, we get another 2 weeks off, and we go right into Bike Week. So literally, we waste zero time. So I mean, after the checkered flag, if you're here camping within the infield, within hours, you're going to see over 6,600 tons of brought in,
Wow.
so that we can build a Supercross course. They literally start building it the Monday after the Daytona 500 because we've only got 2 weeks to transform, that track that hosts over 100,000 folks for NASCAR into an event that's ready for Supercross racing, which is entirely different, animal of its own. So for Bike Week, we have Supercross racing. We host amateur Supercross. We have ATVs on track. We've got heavy bikes on track, and we end with the Daytona 200, which is a sports bike race that following Saturday. From there, we have another NASCAR event in early July called the Coke Zero Sugar 400. Typically takes place around Independence Day weekend. But even in between those events, we've hosted Country Music Festival over the last few years. We have NASCAR Racing Experience, which allows anyone to drive a NASCAR race car on track just about every weekend of the year. And then we're open just about 365 days a year with daily tours. So between all of our major events and all of the smaller track rentals and other events, we're open just about every single day of the year.
So is it more difficult to support all of the events combined than the Daytona 500? Is that an easier event, to help support from a digital marketing perspective? Or is it, the same?
No, I mean the Daytona 500 is to me the fastest day of the year
Yeah.
because you have to be so on point, and there are so many things going on during that day that you don't have time to fail or make a mistake because you're already moving on to the next thing. So once I get to the Daytona 500, I know that day is going to be pretty easy, but there's still a lot of pressure on you that day. The hard part about supporting those other events is it doesn't have as much interest as the Daytona 500. Sure. So how are we trying to keep fans engaged in sports cars when we're talking about the Daytona 500, or someone who's a fan of us because they follow us for the Supercross event? How do we make sure they're not, leaving our channels and leaving, us as a fan? So those are what we spend a lot of time on during the off season. But we always have to keep the Daytona 500 top of mind, top of priority, because that is our keystone event at this time of the year.
Well, and do you find that it makes it more difficult? I mean, at least with the Daytona 500 for people that don't follow NASCAR, NASCAR starts out with their Super Bowl event, the very first event of the year. It's not like you build up through the season. I mean, you start off in Daytona and then go off in February and then go off into a bunch of races. Do you find that makes it any more difficult, or do you notice any difference at all as far as the build up to an event, because it doesn't have a season long full of digital conversations, it's basically the first of the year and go. You're rocketing into the big event.
Yeah, I mean, it has both its pros and its cons.
Yeah.
For us, we love having the fact that the biggest race of the year is the first race of the year
Yeah.
because it gives us a little bit of time to focus on it.
Yeah. And you get
But
to be the prime center of conversation just in a more narrow window.
100%, yeah. But for us, when you think about it, we have to work hand in hand with our sanctioning body, NASCAR, to make sure that everyone in the industry is talking about the Daytona 500 and building anticipation for that event, which they start to do typically in January. And we're trying to work with them more on how do we keep that conversation going year round. The struggle and the challenge can be NASCAR runs from February to November. So when we get to November, when that's the end of their season, a lot of the times they're ready to take a break, and deservedly so. They've been going for 10 plus months. But from our perspective, that's when we need everyone to pick up the discussion about the Daytona
Exactly.
500.
Yeah.
So while they're all going on vacation and while the drivers are taking their well needed rest, how do we keep that conversation going? That the season's over, but that just means teams are already preparing for the Daytona 500. It's right around the corner. It's 2 months away. It's the series' biggest race. When you win the Daytona 500, you're not called a winner. You're called a champion, and it means a lot more to those drivers.
Sure.
So to keep that discussion going even through their off season, it's a bit of a challenge at sometimes. But the fact that we have NASCAR, our sanctioning body, helping promote that discussion helps us a lot.
So what are you doing to leverage digital and social and other forms of marketing, email to drive traffic to these various events? I mean, at what point does, especially with the other events, especially at what point does the hype, in the conversations that the TV networks and all the other channels, and that hype that drives traffic as well, digital traffic, are you just sort of amplifying what's out there, especially in social, or what kind of, things are you doing to help leverage digital and social to help drive that traffic?
Yeah, so we work with our media partners and our TV partners to try and keep Daytona 500 in the discussion year round. So Denny Hamlin, for example, just won the race this year. Anytime that they're mentioning Denny Hamlin on Fox or on NBC, the hope is that they're mentioning him as Daytona 500 champion, so that even if they're racing in Auto Club like they did this past weekend, there's still some emphasis on that big race that took place. Our media buys and a lot of our email strategy and a lot of the discussions will start around when the playoffs start. So typically around August, September, you'll start to see some institutional media come out. If you're at the events, you'll start to see some of our spots run. And then some of our media buys will start in November, December. It really amplifies starting there. We work hand in hand with the industry to make sure that the message points are are synced up and on the same discussions. And then from an email perspective, you'll start to see upsell opportunities, us targeting lapsed customers, really amplify in December and January. And then the biggest challenge we have is while that's all going on, we also have to promote our January race, the Rolex 24. Mm-hmm. That's also another humongous event that has, hundreds of thousands of people attending. So how do you not lose focus on that event while still promoting the biggest race of the year is another challenge we have.
So in, at least especially Daytona 500, how many drivers are there typically?
So there'll be 40 cars that enter the race. Okay. You might get 43 to 45 on some of the smaller teams trying to make the race, but NASCAR's kind of made some changes a few years back that 40 cars will race at the Daytona 500.
So to the point you brought up just a second ago about Denny Hamlin, you basically got, per your point, 40 to say 45 different influencers, if you will. Are you starting to see, especially as they have just massive social profiles, is a Denny Hamlin, a Jeff Gordon, or whoever over the years, or the recent years, especially with social, are you seeing them help drive a lot of traffic when you go back and look at where the traffic's coming from as well?
Yeah, I mean, for our sport, you can kind of equivocate some of those drivers as teams. So like when Dale Earnhardt Jr. left the sport a few years ago, that's almost the same as if the Yankees left Major League Baseball.
Oh, wow.
He was so popular that, the fans do like the team. So you'll have your Hendrick guys, your Penske, fans, but for the most part, they're rooting for the drivers. And we've worked hand in hand with NASCARs and their driver teams to really get the drivers on board. This past year, we actually went down to Charlotte in December to really share our message points for the Daytona 500, help them understand our messaging calendar. So understanding that in December, Daytona's talking about, okay, the cars are being prepped for Daytona in February. Can we create content that focuses on the teams creating these cars? In January, the messaging and discussion starts to focus on, okay, the journey's here. The teams are starting to load up their haulers and they're making their trips down. On February, we start to focus around Daytona 500 Media Day and all of the buzz surrounding the major event. So what we did is we went to Charlotte. We met with each of the teams, figured out, are there specific ways that we incorporate your drivers into content we're creating? For example, we did a countdown starting with 88 days until the Daytona 500. Alex Bowman drives the number 88. Created some content around that, around his picks and what he's done in the race. We amplified that and had NASCAR share it. We had Alex Bowman share it. We had their team share it. So we're starting to work a lot more with integrating our sanctioning body, with integrating the teams and the drivers themselves into sharing the same message, so that if you're a fan of NASCAR, you may not follow Daytona, but you probably follow your favorite driver. You probably follow NASCAR. Making sure that those message points are the same and driving the same anticipation towards either buying a ticket for the event or watching the event on Fox. All of those discussions are kind of leading towards the same goal.
Wow, that's such a powerful point. I mean, are you seeing measured success from efforts where they didn't do that to where they are now doing it? Because I am a big fan of keeping that message aligned and simple. And to me, the confused buyer always says no. So the fact that they're helping share that same message throughout multiple different journeys is really important.
Yeah, one of the easiest ways we can measure that success is we started to create driver ticket packages. So we've created a driver ticket package this past year with Austin Dillon. We created one with Martin Truex Jr., who's a former Cup champion as well. And basically, a fan can buy a ticket to this package. It includes a ticket to the race, it includes an autographed item, and it includes 15 to 25-minute Q&A discussion with the driver. And when we went back and we sold out all of those different ticket packages, we looked at the data behind, are we drawing in new fans or old fans? We found that 75% of the fans that bought one of these packages is a new fan to our event. So that's just hard measurements on how we can figure, okay, we're utilizing these drivers to market a position to not only get people interested in the event, but actually buy it.
So are you doing anything interesting from a content standpoint, especially, for the big race, the Daytona 500?
Yeah, so this year we actually, partnered with a guy by the name of Jared Jacobs, goes by the name of Gold Yeller. He creates Lego recreations of basically sporting moments.
Nice.
We kind of found him on YouTube. He recreated the Auburn, Alabama last second touchdown play. It kind of went viral, with us and the NASCAR world and the Daytona 500. We've got so many of these famous broadcast calls that make perfect for visuals like this. So we worked hand in hand with NASCAR and we created 5 moments in Lego form. We created, the 1998 Dale Earnhardt Sr. win. We created a Dale Jr. win, and we created a few others like the 1979 fight, which was the first ever Daytona 500 broadcast on TV. And we basically worked with the industry and worked with the drivers to distribute this content. So from Daytona's channels, we distributed the first 2, and then we created one with Austin Dillon, and we actually had Austin Dillon share that out. We created one with Jeff Gordon, which was a preview for the Daytona 500, and Jeff Gordon shared it out on his account. We created a few that NASCAR shared on their account. So not only are we all creating the same content that's promoting the upcoming event, we're utilizing those drivers and the sanctioning body to spread that message so that it goes further.
That's fantastic. So what is generally your best channel from a digital standpoint for at least how you measure performance?
Well, lately I'd say it'd be Instagram. Instagram is our fastest growing channel.
Sure.
I think we've probably gained 200,000 followers in the last year or two.
Nice.
Our largest channel is Facebook. And when you look at especially our NASCAR events, historically, the audience scales a little bit older. And so a lot of them are still on Facebook. But we've started to kind of make sure and manage the content we're posting on it. We don't post nearly as frequently. We're very cognizant of what the algorithm does on Facebook and how, a lack of engagement on one post affects the next 3 or 4 posts. We're really making the quality of content on Facebook is top notch. We post a lot more frequently on Twitter. And Instagram is where you'll see a lot of our younger audiences. So we're starting to focus a little bit more on Twitter, um, and Twitter and Instagram. We had a really unique strategy with Snapchat a few years
Yeah.
ago where we would utilize and leverage drivers as takeovers. So throughout the Daytona 500, you might see the Daytona 500 from the perspective of Dale Jr. and he would shoot and post on our Snapchat account. So with the decline in users on Snapchat, we've started to shift that takeover strategy towards Instagram stories, which has
Hmm.
been really
Sure.
really unique and engaging content for us on race day. When you're seeing a driver wake up in his RV, taking his golf cart ride to a driver appearance, you're seeing him actually walk through the smoke during driver intros and ride around in a truck. So having those unique first person perspectives has allowed us to create some cool content that we're leveraging on Instagram. And that's really a channel we're starting to focus the most on.
Sure. So keywords. I mean, what drives the traffic for a big name branded sporting event? If you were going to, give advice to someone else who's, working with a large venue, would you spend when you look at your content, your ads, and all the different things, do you spend more time on the event location like Daytona International Speedway, the league affiliation with somebody like NASCAR, the name of the driver like a Denny Hamlin, or the race itself like Daytona 500 or Coke Zero Sugar 400?
Yeah, for us, the Daytona 500 is probably a little bit easier
Sure.
because when folks are searching for the Daytona 500, they're either going to find us or NASCAR. And if they find NASCAR, that they buy tickets through NASCAR, it's the same as buying tickets for us. We do have to compete a little bit with secondhand ticket sellers,
Oh
but for
yeah.
the most part, that's a little more easier to handle. We're starting to focus a little bit on like the local keywords, like things to do in Daytona Beach,
Yeah.
and, places to go. But what I'll say a challenge for us is some of our smaller events. So if you look at something like Bike Week is a Daytona Beach event, not necessarily a Daytona International Speedway event.
Sure. Good
So
point.
we're still trying to sell tickets to our races, but if you look at Harley Davidson down the road, they're trying to make sure people see what's going on at their facility. And you look at Main Street down the road, they're trying to make sure that people are going to their concerts they're putting on during Bike Week. So everyone's competing for the term Bike Week, but they're all competing for different audiences. So we have to kind of structure our thought process around that a little bit differently and kind of get a little more creative with Bike Week at Daytona and racing and motorcycles to draw everyone in from the Harley fan to the concert goer to make sure they're still coming to the races.
So for you personally, then, what's a level of success, that you can aim for in digital marketing? How do you measure your own performance? Is it, you know, butts in the seats? Is it clicks on content? Where do you sort of set the bar for yourself as far as what you need to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, we start with unique visitors and visits, but I mean, when it comes down to it, for us, it's all about ticket sales.
Hmm.
So, how many visits until you actually purchase is a big key for us. But understanding the fact that, I could reach 10 million people if none of them buy a ticket, I haven't done my job. So, being able to translate those unique visitors into a ticket sale is kind of the metric that we eventually land on.
How do you keep people engaged as many times as possible throughout the year with keeping people relevantly focused on Daytona International Speedway as opposed to just one big event?
Yeah, that's probably our most unique challenge.
Yeah.
We approach it from a seasonal perspective on our content calendar, so that if you're in December, you're going to be seeing messages promoting the Rolex race. You're going to see messages promoting the Daytona 500. When we get to March, a lot of that conversation and content is going to be focused on Bike Week because that's the next big event we have. We'll still sprinkle in some Daytona 500 content. That'll be consistent year round. That is our event. But we won't necessarily talk about the Rolex event until we get closer towards, when tickets go on that event for next year, when we're starting to review tickets for that event. Once we get out of Bike Week in March, the conversation again shifts towards renewal for Daytona 500 tickets, Coke Zero Sugar 400 tickets. If we have a music festival going on during that time, we'll make sure that we're promoting that a little bit more. But for the most part, we approach it in a seasonal perspective with the Daytona 500 having content year round. That's just something we have to make sure it stays at the top of everyone's mind.
Sure. Well, something you said earlier, and that I wanted to kind of touch back on is when you started your own career and you were working and you worked for an agency in San Francisco, and then you came back to be closer to home, and then join them. As a marketer, as a digital marketer, where do you go to learn? What do you sort of struggle with as a marketer, where you're always trying to improve, digitally your performance and your, the knowledge with so many things that change when you work for a brand? I think especially it's important with your brand because your season is year round, but it's also, you got to be really on point for those majorly big events each weekend that you host them.
Yeah, so I think it's imperative that everyone reads. I set aside 30 minutes every morning to go through a few different e-newsletters like Front Office Sports, Hashtag Sports, TechCrunch, ZDNet,
Yeah.
some of those big ones. And I set it 30 minutes before I go to bed to catch up on some of the articles I might have missed throughout the day.
Then, of course, you listen to A Shark's Perspective as often as you can.
100% of that. A few other different podcasts. I try to attend a few conferences every year. One of them is the SEAT conference, which I got to put a shameless plug in that we're actually hosting this year. So if you want to come to the Sports Entertainment Alliance and Technology Conference here in Daytona International Speedway, go ahead and Google that and come on down. Other than that, I try and meet with people and have coffee. That's kind of my biggest thing. Is I get a lot of calls from either students or people that I'm aware of in the local area, whether they're part of AMA or they're in another company and I know they're in the same marketing industry. I've got no shame in just reaching out and saying, hey, let's grab some coffee. I'd love to learn about how people got to where they are, what struggles they have, what they succeed in, what they're seeing from their perspective. So I take a lot of coffee and lunch meetings to try and talk to people one-on-one.
So what are your thoughts on, how do you look at digital marketing strategy and social strategy?
Yeah, I think to me, the very best practice is to create great content and tell great stories.
Thank you.
If you're telling a great story about why fans need to attend the event in such a way that inspires them to take action to buying a ticket, then you're doing your job as a marketer.
Yep.
I think too many times this has been a long approach, especially on the social media strategy side, where they think they have best practices where you can only post 3 times on this channel and you can't post the same content here or there. But what I think is people need to focus on what works for them and not necessarily the best practice for everybody, because everybody's channels are different and everybody's audiences are different. You can take some key learnings and try and test and apply those to see if they work on your channels. But what I wouldn't say is just take anybody's approach of, okay, you got to have unique content for every single channel, because if you post the same content on Facebook and Twitter, it doesn't give them a reason to follow you on. Well, that's not necessarily true, because content on Facebook lasts longer than last year, or maybe they just didn't see their Twitter feed that day. Yep. So what I would just recommend is everybody, obviously take best practices into consideration, test them, figure out what works best for your strategy, your channels, and your organization, and kind of build your own strategy from the ground up.
So, Matt, you are just a few miles away from the Florida beaches, and I'm compelled to ask you, what is your favorite kind of shark and why?
Oh, man. Probably the hammerhead shark, just because it's something that you look at, it's kind of funny looking. You don't necessarily maybe think that it's dangerous, but it's probably one of the most deadly sharks you could ever come across. There are a few other different like shovel-headed sharks that might look like it that are a little less tame, but the hammerhead, man, is so unique and so cool. I just that's one that I'm drawn towards.
Agreed. Well, Matt, it is that special time in the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
I am. Let's do it.
All right. Number 1, paid advertising or content marketing?
I'm a little biased because I do a lot more on the content side. Like I just said, I think if you're telling great stories through content marketing, it goes a long way. So I'm going to lean towards content marketing.
Fair enough. Number 2, which one of these is the most realistic NASCAR movie? Days of Thunder starring Tom Cruise or Talladega Nights starring Will Ferrell? Because if you ain't first, you're last.
More realistic, I'm going to have to say Days of Thunder, but I think they're both equal in entertainment.
Yeah, and also Disney cars would have been any one of the three would have been an acceptable answer. So,
For sure.
number 3, sports marketing or digital marketing?
That's a tough one.
Yeah, let's see where your heart is.
For now, I think my heart is in sports marketing.
Okay, number 4. Number 3, Dale Sr. or number 8, Dale Jr.?
I'm going to go number 3, Dale Sr.
Yeah, he did win 34 races at Daytona, so it's kind of hard to argue against that.
He is the king of Daytona.
He is. And the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
It's so tough because I probably eat a Chick-fil-A sausage biscuit almost 3 times a week.
Oh, nice.
But I'm going to say
not
cornbread.
on Sundays.
I love cornbread.
You love cornbread. Good man. So, Matt, where can people find out more about you, the Daytona International Speedway, follow you on social, and more?
Well, they can follow us at DIS Updates on Twitter and Instagram, and search for Daytona International Speedway on Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter at Matthew Vinson, and then go ahead and add me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect. And like I said, love to chat with everybody, maybe get some coffee if you're in the area, or, hopefully down the road see you at a conference.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt, for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
No problem. Thanks, Shark.
So there was my conversation with Matt Vinson, the Director of Digital Marketing at Daytona International Speedway, and he's a subject matter expert at sports and digital marketing. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, I'm such a big fan of keeping messages succinct, simple, to the point, and aligned across as many touch points as possible. And that's what Matt and his team are doing. They're integrating the same message with the teams and the drivers and the sanctioning body, and they're making sure that the message points that they're driving are the same and leading towards the same goal. Keep the customer from getting confused with mixed messaging or multiple offers. You'll hear me say it often. The confused buyer always says no, so keep it simple. Second, like so many other marketers, his benchmark all comes down to ticket sales. Knowing that they focus on that main goal helps align so much of their other digital marketing efforts. When you align your messaging, it makes it a lot easier to drive towards that common goal. Third, he made a great point on strategy and how we create content. And I quote, "If you're telling a great story about why fans need to attend the event in such a way that inspires them to take action, to buy a ticket, then you're doing your job as a marketer." Great point, Matt. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. It's been my honor to serve you in order to discuss another one of many components that makes up marketing today. So now's the time for a little shake and bake. So join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.